Laila. That's Shema Kolenu. Lord, hear our voice by Shlomo Katz. How's everybody doing? It's great to be with you. The Super Bowl is raging in the house. My son has 10 teenagers over watching the game. So I'm retreating over here into the office. We're going to proceed with our learning even though the Los Angeles Rams are in the Super Bowl. That's dedication. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we gather to do some learning on Super Bowl Sunday? James in Indianapolis, Bill in mid-Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Joseph in Massachusetts, Nancy in North Carolina, Paula, light up the darkness in the Great Northwest, Yehudit in Florence, South Carolina, Shandora in the Bronx, Sharon in New Jersey, Valsa has a bunch of hearts and I like them, Rebecca in LA, John in Maine, Paula, happy early Valentine's Day. Oh my gosh, it's tomorrow. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And Karen in Northern California. Over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in Georgia, Debbie in Toms River, New Jersey. It's not a very long daf. I kind of would like to see the end of the game. So we're going to just keep it moving. But I certainly will be taking questions at the end. We're picking it up about a paragraph and a half, more or less. From the top on page 4a. We're still in chapter 1 here of Tractate Chagigah, the 13th volume of the Talmud, the laws of the mitzvah to appear before the Lord 3 times a year when the temple is standing. And don't come empty-handed. And what are the specifics of that? So as we've seen in this first Mishna, all males are obligated. And then there's a whole bunch of people who are exempt. And we're continuing our understanding of who is exempt from the obligation. Permitted to go and make the pilgrimage and be part of it, but not obligated. The Mishnah taught, and the tumtum and the hermaphrodite are exempt. So the tumtum, that's the Hebrew word. Hermaphrodite, translation of the Hebrew word from Greek, I would think, androgynos, right? The androgyne, hermaphrodite. And basically the tumtum is one with indeterminate sex organs. Really, I think it's a condition that rare, but it happens occasionally that a baby has sort of like a flap of skin covering the genitals. So you're not sure if it's a male or a female. And then the hermaphrodite is one who has aspects of both genders, right? So one is neither and one is both. And combined with male and female, these are the 4 genders of the Talmud. So the tumtum and the hermaphrodite are exempt from the mitzvah of appearance in the temple. Why? The sages taught with regard to the verse, 3 occasions in the year, all your males will appear before the Lord God. Exodus 23:17. Now, had the verse simply said 3 times a year, your males will appear before the Lord your God, this would serve to exclude women from this mitzvah. Okay, the males need to appear. Why does it say your males? It could have said 3 times a year, males. The males are obligated to appear. Or it could have said 3 times a year, all the males are obligated to appear. But it actually says all your males. And so from these 2 extra words, all and your, the sages are going to learn out some rules. So the verse simply said males. This would serve to exclude women from this mitzvah. And by specifying your males, it comes to exclude a tumtum and a hermaphrodite as well. Furthermore, when the verse says all your males, this serves to include male minors, right? So the all includes males who are not adults, but the your males makes it specify like who are clearly male, right? And so the tumtum and the androgynos are not clearly male. They might be male, they might not, right? So they're exempt from the obligation. Of course, they're welcome to make the pilgrimage festival, but they're not obligated. And the master said in the Baraisa, males comes to exclude women. And the Gemara asks, why do I need a verse for this halacha, for this law? After all, the obligation of appearance on a festival is a positive, time-bound mitzvah, and women are exempt from any positive, time-bound mitzvah, with a few exceptions. So let's just read the law on that. The mitzvahs in which women are obligated. Women are obligated in all the negative mitzvahs in the Torah, just like men. Negative mitzvahs meaning thou shalt not. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Anything that is a thou shalt not, women are obligated the same as men, with the exception of you shall not round the corners of your heads, nor shall you mar the corners of your beard. That's a negative prohibition that applies only to men, and for obvious reasons. And I guess I'm sure there's somebody asking the question somewhere, one who was born female and identifies as a male would have a beard, but then it's a male. I mean, I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade to rule on that kind of thing. The genders of the Talmud are, for now, male, female, tumtum, and androgynous. At any rate, women are obligated in all the negative mitzvahs of the Torah, just like men, with the exception of the prohibition, don't round the corners of your heads nor mar the corners of your beard. And the prohibition against priests becoming ritually impure with by contact with a corpse. Now, in traditional Judaism, a woman can't be a Kohen, right? So that's just not going to apply to her. On the other hand, so the women are basically 99.99999% of all the laws, negative mitzvahs, women and men, exactly the same. Positive mitzvahs, thou shalt, right? Things you must do, that you must pray twice a day, that you must tithe, that you must have children, things like that. Those are positive mitzvahs. Time-bound positive mitzvahs are like you must pray twice a day, or you must bring certain offerings at specific times, right? So time-bound positive mitzvahs, women are exempt from all positive time-bound mitzvahs except for Kiddush on Shabbos, right? So they don't make Kiddush, but they're obligated to hear Kiddush on Shabbos. Eating matzah on the first night of Passover, right? That's a time-bound positive mitzvah. You must eat matzah on the first night of Passover, women and men, women in the same position as men. Slaughtering and eating the paschal offering, right? So when the temple is standing and we slaughter the Passover lamb on the afternoon before the 15th of Nisan, women obligated, just like men. The assembly, which we've been talking about, that every 7 years the entire nation gathers on Sukkot and hears the king read the book of Deuteronomy, women obligated just like men. And rejoicing on the festival, and we'll get to defining exactly what that means, but the obligation to rejoice on a festival, women stand in the same place as men. Okay, so now we come back. The master said in the Baraisa, males comes to exclude women. Okay, but we know that 3 times a year, everyone come to Jerusalem and bring an offering. That is a time-bound positive mitzvah. And since we already know that women are excluded from time-bound positive mitzvahs, why does it say all males need to come? Why are we learning out from that women are excluded from this law if they're already exempt, not excluded, but exempt from time-bound positive mitzvahs? After all, the obligation of appearance on a festival is a positive time-bound mitzvah, and women are exempt from any positive time-bound mitzvah. And the Gemara answers, this statement was necessary, as otherwise it could enter your mind to say, let us derive by means of a verbal analogy between the term appearance, which appears here, appear before the Lord at the temple 3 times a year, and the word appearance stated with regard to the mitzvah of assembly, to gather to hear the king every 7 years, which is also a positive time-bound mitzvah. And just as there, women are obligated in the mitzvah of assembly, so too here we might have thought that women are obligated in the mitzvah of appearance on the festival. Therefore, the Baraisa teaches us that women are exempt. And the master said in the Baraisa, your males comes to exclude a tumtum and a hermaphrodite. By the way, I just want to say Nina and I had just a great rollicking conversation last night about all different kinds of things. And, some of these ideas that have come up recently where, certain classes of people are exempt from certain obligations. Women are exempt. A deaf mute might be exempt. Somebody with limited mental capacity might be exempt. At a Shabbos table, a guest brought up this thing that women are disqualified from being witnesses in certain kinds of court cases before a rabbinic court. And to the modern ear, all of this sounds, so patriarchal and awful, right? And exclusionary and non-inclusive and all this. And a thought that came to me about that is this. These laws under which people are treated differently, and for example, the descendants of Aaron are Kohanim, right? They are Cohens. They are priests who can serve in the temple. And nobody else, no matter how much Torah they learn, no matter how well versed in the laws of the sacrifices they are, no matter how qualified they would be through merit to become a priest, no one who's not born a Cohen can become a Cohen. It's just the way it is, right? So under the laws of the Torah, there are many distinctions made in which people end up in different positions. And, it might seem unfair on the surface, but the fact is they're laws from God and we have to follow them. And we don't know why they are the way they are, right? And generally speaking, when we talk about laws that we don't understand, there's no seeming logical basis to them. Those are chukim, laws that just come from God and we do it because he said so. What's interesting about that is laws from God make those kinds of distinctions. Laws from humans cannot, right? I mean, you can say that the sages will make rabbinic decrees in order to protect us from coming to violate the written laws from God. That's something else. But in terms of, a constitutional democracy making laws, that's actually implied that they need to not discriminate against groups and classes of people, that everyone is equal under the law, a law that is made by humans, right? There, everyone must be equal under the law. A law that comes from God, we didn't make it up. It was given to us. Now, what's so interesting about that is it might seem unfair, but when you submit to the law, you end up in situations in your life that you just wouldn't have ended up in. And then it's amazing how your life can just take on meaning and significance, and you find yourself in surprising situations you never would have been in otherwise. Simple example, if we're away, a couple of times we've been away on holiday, just staying in a hotel, not as part of some kind of organized Shabbos program or Passover program, but just my family is in a hotel for a few days, and Shabbos is one of the days. Okay, so now we're Jews, and the rest of the guests in the hotel, might not be. Maybe we're the only observant Jews there. Maybe we're the only Jews there, period. So everyone else in the hotel, they can eat whatever they want. They can ride in the elevators up and down, whatever they want. They can turn lights on and off however they want. Yeah, so we can't, right? So we're Shomer Shabbos, so we're going to have to make arrangements in advance that we can walk up and down the stairs, that we can't use card keys on the locks. We're going to try to avoid crossing in front of a door that has a sensor where that door is going to electrically open, that we cause it to open if we knew that we could avoid it. And it's like we're living in this video game that we're playing and nobody else is playing it, And it's like you're in this very strange situation, but, they're Jews and everyone else is not a Jew. That's another distinction, You can become a Jew, but for the most part, not that many people do, and the rest of us are born Jewish. And, and then, so we have different obligations than non-Jews. Non-Jews are obligated in the 7 Noahide laws. And if you study them, at length, because it takes years to learn them, it's not like the 7 simple laws. There's plenty for a non-Jew to do to show their love of God, but it's enough with the 7 mitzvahs of Noah. And a Jew has 613 commandments. None of us can do them all because they don't all apply to all people. Many are for the priests, and the rest of us can't fulfill those laws because we weren't born Kohanim. But the point is, you find yourself in a situation in life that your Torah observance brought you to, and you're like, how did I get here? And yet there's like a joy that comes with it, and a significance and a meaning and a feeling of being where you're supposed to be that is just beautiful. So the laws of man must not discriminate, but the laws of God make distinctions. We don't know why. That's the way they are. We submit and our lives take on so much added meaning. Okay. Where was I? Okay. So the master said in the Baraisa, your males, right? The word your males comes to exclude a tumtum and an androgynos, the hermaphrodite. And the Gemara asks, okay, granted, the exclusion of a hermaphrodite was necessary as it could enter your mind to say that since he possesses an aspect of masculinity, he has both organs, right? Male and female. Okay, so he has male organs. He has a male sexual organ, so he should be obligated like any male. Therefore, the Baraisa teaches us that a hermaphrodite is a being unto himself, which is neither male nor female, but something else. Now, isn't that interesting? Like, you'd think that the idea of an indeterminate gender, a gender which is neither male nor female, seems very modern. You like one of the alphabet letters, LGBTQ, like somewhere in there. 2,000 years old. Our sages were already talking about these kinds of issues. However, as the status of a tumtum who lacks external sexual organs is a halachic uncertainty, right? We don't know what he is or she or what's going on underneath that skin flap. So is a verse necessary to exclude an uncertainty? Like the hermaphrodite has a male organ, so we might have thought to include him in all males must appear before the Lord. And so specific interpretation of the language of the verse exempts him. But the tumtum, right, we have no reason to believe that there is, with any definiteness, a male sexual organ there. So why wouldn't we think that he's automatically exempt from the command, all males appear before the Lord? And Abaye said it is referring to a case when the testicles of a tumtum are on the outside, although his penis is not visible. And the verse teaches that this tumtum is not obligated in the mitzvah of appearance, despite the fact that he is certainly of the male gender, but because the penis has not been revealed yet, okay, so he's exempt. Sort of like the similar discussion that one who is blind in one eye might be exempt from the obligation to appear 3 times a year. And the master said in the Baraisa, all your males comes to include minors. And the Gemara asked, didn't we learn in the Mishna, all are obligated to appear except for a deaf mute, an imbecile, and a minor? Why are we, now we're learning the minor is obligated to appear, male minors. But there it said, the deaf mute we talked about, one who is either deaf or mute, is obligated in the mitzvah of rejoicing, though exempt in the mitzvah to appear. The deaf mute, one who is both deaf and mute, this one is exempt from all the mitzvahs. Okay, we discussed that already. The imbecile doesn't have the capacity to understand or to fulfill the mitzvahs. And now we're learning that it said that the minor was exempt, and now we just heard that the minor is obligated. So what's going on? La Kasha, this is not difficult. Here the Baraisa that obligates minors is referring to a minor who has reached the age of training in mitzvahs. And there the Mishna is referring to a minor who has not yet reached the age of training in mitzvahs. Both of them are not adults. They're less than 13 years old. But whatever age, you sort of become able to start learning the mitzvahs, then you're obligated to make the festival. And if you're too young for that, then you're not. Well, what is that age? And the Gemara asks, the obligation of a minor who has reached the age of training is one that applies by rabbinic law. So how then can the Baraisa derive this law from a verse? Didn't the rabbis define it? Why are they deriving this from a verse? And the Gemara answers, yes, it is indeed so, and the verse is a mere support for this rabbinic obligation. And the Gemara asks, rather, for what purpose does the verse, all your males come? It comes to teach that which acherim taught. Acherim means others, but as we learned a while back, that usually refers to Rabbi Meir. Right? Rabbi Meir kind of got himself in hot water with the other sages at a certain point, and some of the Mishnas that would have been credited to him instead are credited to others. Okay, but acherim, as it is taught in a Baraisa, acherim say that a scrimper, which is one who gathers dog feces to give them to tanners for the purpose of tanning leather hides, and a melder of copper is one who purifies copper from dross, and a tanner of hides are all exempt from the mitzvah of appearance. Why? Because their occupation inflicts upon them a particularly unpleasant odor. And for them to be in a crowd of people, because you can imagine that during these festivals, these pilgrimage festivals, massive crowds enter Jerusalem. And for this person who's afflicted that his profession makes him so smelly, it's going to be really difficult to be in this crowd, both for himself and for the ones around him. So they are exempt from the obligation, according to Achirim. And this is because it is stated, all your males, which indicates that only one who is able to ascend with all your males is obligated, and that excludes those who are not suited to ascend in this, crowd with all your males, because people avoid their company. Now, the Mishnah taught that women and slaves who are not emancipated are exempt from the mitzvah of appearance. And the Gemara asks, well, granted, women are exempt, as we said earlier, that this is derived from the phrase, you are males. However, with regard to slaves, from where do we derive that they are exempt? And Rav Huna said that the verse states, before the Lord God, Exodus 23:17, and this indicates that one who has only one master is obligated. And that excludes this slave who has another master, an earthly master. He's not free to go with his time, and so he is not obligated in the mitzvah to go up to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festivals when the temple is standing. And the Gemara asks, why do I need a verse to teach this law? After all, with regard to every mitzvah in which a woman is obligated, a slave is also obligated in that mitzvah. It's very interesting because the slaves that are being discussed here are non-Jewish slaves, Canaani, right? A Canaanite slave. And so a Canaanite slave that is owned by a Jew, the slave is not a Jew. He didn't become a Jew by becoming a slave of a Jew. And yet, while he's a slave of a Jew, he is going to be obligated in certain mitzvahs. Which ones? The same ones that women are obligated in. So after all, with regard to every mitzvah in which a woman is obligated, a slave is also obligated in that mitzvah. And with regard to every mitzvah in which a woman is not obligated, a slave is not obligated in it either. And the reason for this principle, which we learn elsewhere, is that it is derived by means of a verbal analogy between the phrase to her, la, right? So to her, in Leviticus 19:20, which is speaking about a female slave, a female Canaanite slave, who has been promised to a man, like the owner has betrothed her to someone else. She's going to get married, and then I guess the owner has sex with her. Now, normally that would be a capital offense of adultery, because once she's betrothed, designated for another man, she is prohibited to all other men. But because she's still a slave, now we're not talking about rape, but if they have sex together, this is not a capital offense of adultery, because she's not a free woman, and the relationship between her and her master is complicated. So within that law, when it's being taught, it says that he has not given her freedom to her. And written with regard in another place in Deuteronomy 24:3 is with regard to a divorced woman, where a man is divorcing his wife and he has given her the bill of divorce, and then she goes out and is with another man, and then she can't come back to her first husband. At any rate, these two laws are tied together because they both use this word la, to her. And the sages use that verbal analogy to create this relationship between women and slave in terms of their obligations under mitzvahs. And Ravina said, this verse is necessary only to teach the exemption of one who is half slave and half freeman, right? So if we're saying that women and slaves are in the same position with respect to mitzvahs, why does the Mishna need to spell that out? And now we're hearing the answer, which you've actually heard before, that what they're talking about is a slave who is half free and half slave, meaning the slave was owned by two masters and one of the masters emancipated him. We learned elsewhere that Beis Shammai ruled that that's an impossible situation, and the other, the master who still owns half the slave has to free the slave, and Beis Hillel capitulated to Beis Shammai on that, and that became the law. Once a slave is half free, he has to be all the way free. He may still have a debt to the master who hasn't freed him, so he'll owe the money that would have cost to purchase his freedom, but the freedom kicks in immediately. So Ravina said this verse is necessary only to teach the exemption of one who is half slave and half free. And the Gemara notes that the language of the Mishna is also precise as it teaches women and slaves who are not emancipated. What is the purpose of specifying who are not emancipated? If we say that this means that they are not emancipated at all, then it could have just said slaves, women and slaves, without any further description. Rather, is it not the case that the Mishnah is referring to slaves who are not entirely emancipated? And who are these slaves? The one who is half slave and half free. Learn from this that interpretation is correct. Our Mishnah also taught, and the lame, the blind, the sick, and the old are exempt from the mitzvah of appearance. Why? Because it's difficult for them to walk up to Jerusalem for the festival. The sages taught, times, regalim, right? 3 times a year you shall appear. And this alludes to the use of one's feet, because 3 times, regalim, right? Times, regalim, similar to raglaim, feet. And therefore it excludes people with artificial legs and those who are unable to walk. People with artificial legs, although they are able to walk, they are exempt from traveling as they do not have feet. Alternatively, the term regalim comes to exclude the lame, the sick, the blind, the old, and one who is unable to ascend on his own feet. And the Gemara asks the last category of one who is unable to ascend on his feet. What does this add? And the Brisa already taught that the lame and the sick are exempt. And Rava said it comes to add, we're on 4b now, a delicate man who cannot walk without shoes. Why would we exclude somebody who is unable to walk without shoes? Are we saying he has to walk barefoot all the way from his home to Jerusalem? No, absolutely not. As it is written, when you come to appear before me, who has required this at your hand to trample my courts? Isaiah 1:12. What's this referring to? When you get to the temple, when the temple is standing in Jerusalem, and you enter the courtyard of the temple to bring your offering, you must remove your shoes from your feet. In the temple, everybody walks barefoot. So, if you're unable to walk barefoot, then you can't enter the temple. And if you can't enter the temple, you're exempt from the obligation to appear before the Lord 3 times a year in the temple. It is taught the uncircumcised and the ritually impure are exempt from the mitzvah of appearance. And the Gemara comments, granted, a ritually impure, one who is tameh, is exempt as it is written, and there you shall come, Deuteronomy 12:5, followed by the next verse, and there you shall bring. And the juxtaposition of these verses teaches anyone included in the mitzvah of coming, right, to appear before the Lord at the temple, anyone who may enter the temple is also included in the obligation of bringing offerings. And anyone not included in the mitzvah of coming into the temple courtyard, is not included in the obligation of bringing either, right? So either you can come and then you're also obligated to bring an offering, or you're unable to enter the temple, and then you're also exempt from bringing an offering. You might have thought that, well, okay, he can't enter the temple, but he could send his offering in with somebody else. But no, if for some reason you can't enter the temple, then you're exempt from bringing an offering as well. What does this have to do with the uncircumcised? This is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who amplifies the law so that the uncircumcised is included in the same category as the ritually impure. Right? One who is impure, tameh, because you touched a corpse, or you touched a sheretz, or you had a bodily fluid emission, so that you're in a state of ritual impurity until you go through a state of, process of purification, often immersing in the mikvah, awaiting nightfall, etc. Until you do that and become tahor, ritually pure again, you can't enter the temple. Rabbi Akiva is saying that a Jewish man who is not circumcised is like a Jewish man who is tameh, ritually impure, and therefore he's prohibited from entering the temple. As it is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Akiva says, with regard to the verse, any man of the seed of Aaron, and the way that that's written in Hebrew is ish, right? Man of the seed of Aaron. But we translate that as any man, right? Ish, man, but we translate it as any man of the seed of Aaron, the descendants of Aaron. So these are Kohanim, the priests. Any man who is a descendant of Aaron that is a leper, meaning a mitzvah, right? So he's had an outbreak of that spiritual malady on his skin, or has an issue, right? Like he has gonorrhea, or he has some unwanted issue, liquid issue. He shall not eat of the sacred things, right? He is not qualified to eat the sacred food that only priests are qualified to eat. And the double use of the term ish comes to include the uncircumcised. Like the ritually impure, the uncircumcised may neither eat sacrificial meat nor bring offerings to the temple. Now, what's interesting here, listen to this note from Rav Steinsaltz. The Gemara indicates that the uncircumcised are exempt from the mitzvah of appearance because the Torah equates them with the ritually impure people concerning the prohibition against eating sacred meat. Some commentaries are puzzled by this claim, as there are several verses that explicitly state that the uncircumcised are prohibited from eating sacred food. For example, the Pesach, right? The Paschal lamb that we eat at Passover. The Torah says the uncircumcised shall not eat of it. So why do we need this special, interpretation of ish to know that the uncircumcised are prohibited from eating sacred food? So if the explanation of the Gemara is accepted, these verses are superfluous. Elsewhere where it says that the uncircumcised shall not eat of it, as this law can also be derived from that of the ritually impure. So one answer to this question is that there's a difference between one who willfully remains uncircumcised and someone who is uncircumcised for health reasons. Right? Elsewhere we learn that if, for example, there were two, a mother has a baby boy, they circumcise and he dies, and then she has another son, and they circumcise, and tragically something happens, some complication, and he died, and the second one dies also. That establishes a hazaka, right, a pattern. And if now, she has another baby boy, they don't circumcise him. And he is as Jewish as any other Jewish circumcised male because he's not choosing to go uncircumcised, and the parents are not choosing to go uncircumcised. It's just something that happened because of a medical condition in that family. On the other hand, one whose parents didn't circumcise or who was brought up, like a baby that was kidnapped or something, was brought up among non-Jews, later discovers that he's a Jew and wants to come back into the fold, as it were. So now he should choose as an adult to become circumcised. If he chooses not to do that, then he would be removed from what, you have to be circumcised in order to qualify for. Okay. Where am I? Okay. And the sages taught a ritually impure person is exempt from the mitzvah of appearance, right? If he became impure, for example, because he helped bury a corpse, a beautiful mitzvah that he performed, a wonderful good deed to take care of the dead and make sure they're buried, but that makes you impure. So until you become purified, you can't enter the temple, and you're exempt from appearing before the Lord and exempt from bringing the offering. And it takes 7 days to be purified from touching a corpse. As it is written, and there shall you come, and there shall you bring. Anyone included in the coming is also included in the obligation of bringing, and anyone not included in coming is not included in the obligation of bringing. Rabbi Yochanan ben Dehavai says, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, one who is blind in one of his eyes is exempt from the mitzvah of appearance. As it is stated, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear, yera'eh, before the Lord God. Since there are no vowels in the text, we saw this yesterday also, this can be read as all your males will see, yer'eh, same letters. The Lord God, just different pronunciation, but spelled the same way in the Torah, which appears without vowels, right? Both words are Yud, Resh, Aleph, Hey. So what this teaches that in the same manner that one comes to see, right, the presence of the Lord in the temple, so he comes to be seen. Just as one comes to see with both of his eyes, so too the obligation to be seen by the Lord applies only to one who comes with both of his eyes. Therefore, one who is blind in one eye is exempt from the mitzvah of appearance in the temple. And the Gemara relates that when Rav Huna reached this verse, which can be read as will see, yir'eh, and shall appear, yera'eh, he cried. And he said, Can it happen to a slave whose master expects to see him that the master will eventually distance himself from him and not want him anymore? Right? So it's Rav Huna is having an emotional reaction based on our relationship with God. And he's saying, well, God loves us, right? God has ordered us to come and be seen by him 3 times a year. So can it be that God would ever stop wanting us to come and be seen by him? Would God break up with us, as it were? As it is written, when you come to appear before me, who has required this at your hand to trample my courts? Right? So he's saying like Isaiah was saying that, right, at a certain point in Isaiah, God says your offerings are repulsive to me. Don't come. Why is God saying that? Because the people are living as hypocrites, right? I mean, they're bringing offerings and then they're doing all kinds of awful things in between bringing offerings, right? So Rav Huna is saying, but why would God say don't come? I mean, he wants us to clean up our act, but can it be that he would tell us don't come? He's already ordered us to come. And now we have similar kind of emotional reactions to other verses. Similarly, when Rav Huna reached this verse, he cried, and you shall sacrifice peace offerings, and you shall eat there. Deuteronomy 27:7. And he said, can it happen to a slave whose master expects him to eat at his table, that his master will eventually distance himself from him? Excuse me. As it is written, to what purpose is the multitude of your offerings to me, says the Lord. Again, the same idea. By the time of the prophet Isaiah, the Lord was very angry with the people and saying, don't bring your offerings. But Rav Huna is saying, can it be that a master who tells his slave, his servants, us, come bring food to my table, and now he says, don't come to my table? It must be that we're doing terrible things, but we're always going to be welcome before the Lord to eat at his table. And the Gemara similarly relates, when Rabbi Elazar reached this verse, he cried. What verse? Genesis 45:3. And his brethren could not answer him, for they were affrighted in his presence. Recognize it? That's Joseph and his brothers, right? So after, this is late in Genesis, when the brothers realize that this person that they sold into slavery, their brother, who might have died in the process, now has become the viceroy of Egypt, is the second most powerful man in the world, right? And he's treated them good, and he said, no, God arranged this all. That's why you came here and I saved your lives. It's all good. I don't bear any grudge against you. And then later, as their father comes to his death, the end of his life, Jacob, they think, oh, well, maybe he didn't want to hurt us while our father was alive, but now that we've buried our father, maybe now he'll take his revenge against us. And he said the explanation, right? So why did Rabbi Elazar cry when he read this verse? And he said an explanation of his emotional reaction, if the rebuke of a man of flesh and blood was such that the brothers were unable to speak because they were so afraid that the viceroy of Egypt would hurt them, well, when it comes to the rebuke of the Holy One, blessed be he, how much more so? And that's a general teaching that we should take to heart. Do you ever find yourself afraid of your boss, of the mayor, of the superintendent, of the landlord, afraid of anybody who has power over you in this world, and you're afraid of that person? How much more should you be afraid of our Lord in heaven, who has commanded you to do certain things and commanded you not to do certain things, and we ignore those laws. We don't think about those laws, and we're so, easygoing and casual and cavalier with such laws in a way that we wouldn't be with our boss at work. But how much more we should be, in awe of God and following God's laws is the lesson we're learning for Rabbi Elazar. And when Rabbi Elazar reached this verse, he also cried. And Shmuel said to Shaul, to Saul, why have you disquieted me to bring me up? So after the prophet Samuel, right, who anointed Saul king of Israel, died, he died during Saul's lifetime. But before he died, he told Saul, the crown has been removed from you. It will not pass to your son. It will go to another man. That's King David. But after Samuel died, Saul, was like a very confused, desperate, emotional king. And at a certain point, he really needed to get advice from Samuel. and he went to some kind of like necromancer medium and said, please summon the spirit of Samuel so I can ask him a question. And Samuel came, right? And Samuel said to Saul, why have you disquieted me to bring me up? Why did you bother me, right? I mean, I'm sleeping my eternal rest and you brought me back to earth just so you could talk to me? And he said, if Samuel the righteous was afraid of judgment when he was raised by necromancy, as he thought he was being summoned for a divine judgment, that's the way Rabbi Lazar's reading this. He's like, why are you, bringing me up? Like, actually, Samuel didn't realize that he was just being called to answer some question of Saul's. He thought he was being brought before the heavenly throne, right? So if Samuel the righteous, whose entire life was righteous, is afraid when he's suddenly summoned for an audience he doesn't know with whom, as though he thought he was being summoned for divine judgment, all the more so that we should be afraid who are not as righteous as Samuel the prophet. And the Gemara asks, in the case of Samuel, what is it that he feared? Well, as it is written, and the woman said to Saul, I see a godlike being coming up, Olim, out of the earth. 1 Samuel 28:13. Olim, rising, but it's a plural force, a plural form of the word, indicating that there were two godlike beings coming up out of the earth. Who were they? One of them was Samuel, but the other, who was he? And the Gemara explains that Samuel went and brought Moses with him. He said to Moses, perhaps, heaven forbid, I was summoned for judgment by God. Stand with me and testify on my behalf that there is nothing that you wrote in the Torah that I did not fulfill. Samuel's worried that he's going to be called to answer for some sin that he's not even aware that he committed. And we're being asked to understand that Samuel was entirely righteous. He never sinned in all his life. And when Rabbi Ami reached this verse, he cried, let him put his mouth in the dust. When Rabbi Ami reached the following verse, it made him cry. What was the verse? Let him put his mouth in the dust and perhaps there may be hope. Lamentations 3:29. And he said, a sinner suffers through all this punishment and only perhaps there may be hope. And similarly, when Rabbi Ami reached this verse, he cried from Zephaniah, seek righteousness, seek humility, perhaps you shall be hidden on the day of the Lord's anger. And he said, all of this is expected of each individual, seeking righteousness, seeking humility, and perhaps you will be hidden on the day from the Lord's anger. Well, you might have thought that if every day you're trying to be a righteous person and every day you're trying to be a humble person, you'll be protected from the Lord's anger. But as we've seen, it happens that the righteous suffer and the wicked sometimes prosper in this world. And likewise, when Rabbi Asi reached the verse, he cried. What was the verse? From Amos 5:15, hate the evil and love the good and establish justice in the gate. Perhaps the Lord, the God of hosts, will be gracious. And he said, all this and only perhaps. When Rav Yosef reached the following verse, he cried. Proverbs 13:23, but there are those swept away without justice. And he said, is there one who goes before his time and dies for no reason? And the Gemara answers, yes, like this incident of Rav Bevai bar Abaye, who would be frequented by the company of the angel of death, and he would see how people died at the hands of this angel. And the angel of death said to his agent, go and bring me, i.e. kill, Miriam, the raiser of women's hair, the braider of women's hair. And he went, but instead he brought him Miriam, the raiser of babies. Okay, so let's just clarify what's going on here. So there was an incident about Rav Bevai, the son of Abaye, right? And Rav Bevai, the son of Abaye, actually got to know the angel of death. They were buddies. And he could watch the angel of death operate. And it once happened that the angel of death, who had an agent, right? There's too many people dying in the world for the angel of death to personally attend to them all. So he has agents that he sends out to collect the souls. If you remember the movie Heaven Can Wait, right? It's like an angel is sent to fetch Warren Beatty before he, because he's dying, right? He's a quarterback for the LA Rams. And he looks like he's about to die. So the angel takes his soul and brings him to heaven. But he had very quick reflexes and he wouldn't have died that day. So the angel made a mistake and then they had to find a place to give him some life again. Likewise, this agent of the angel of death made a mistake. He was told to go bring Miriam, who raises women's hair. And instead, he brought another Miriam who helps women raise their babies. Okay, so he brought the wrong woman. The angel of death said to him, I told you to bring Miriam, the raiser of women's hair. And his agent said to him, well, if so, return her to life. The angel of death said to him, well, since you have already brought her, let her be counted toward the number of deceased people. Apparently, this woman died unintentionally, like heaven made a mistake, right? Not God, God forbid, but the angel of death, the agent of the angel of death made a mistake, took the wrong person. So Rav Bevi, who witnessed this, asked the agent of the angel of death, but as her time to die had not yet arrived, how were you even able to kill her? It wasn't her time. And the agent responded that he had the opportunity as she was holding a shovel in her hand, and with it, she was lighting and sweeping the oven. And she took the fire and set it on her foot, and she was scalded, and her luck suffered, which gave me the opportunity, and I brought her, right? So it's like she put herself in a situation of danger, and it was close enough. And the agent of the angel of death was able to take her before her time, right? When we endanger ourselves, we endanger our lives. And Rav Bevi Bar Abaye said to the angel of death, do you have the right to act in this manner, to take someone before their time? And the angel of death said to him, and is it not written, but there are those swept away without justice, right? People who are righteous and die young. The good die young. It happens. And Rav Bevi said to him, and isn't it written, one generation passes away and another generation comes? Ecclesiastes 1:4, which indicates that there is a predetermined amount of time for the life of every generation. And the angel of death said to him, well, I shepherd them, not releasing them until the years of the generation are completed, and then I pass them on to the angel Duma, who oversees the souls of the dead in the next world. And Rav Bevi said to him, ultimately, what do you do with his extra years, those that were taken away from this individual? Like you took somebody before their time. Do those years get credited somewhere in the heavenly scheme? And the angel of death said to him, if there is a Torah scholar, one who learns Torah, who disregards his personal matters, meaning he overlooks the insults of those who wrong him, I add those years to him, and he becomes the replacement of the deceased who was taken before his time. Look at that. When you endanger yourself, you might risk giving up years you would have otherwise had. When you are humble and forgiving and overlook insults against your person, you might just add years to your life. All right, let's see if there's any questions or comments. Okay. Let's get through it quick because there's still some Super Bowl. Bengals winning 20-16. Okay. Questions on Chagigah 4. Karen Elliott, in the time of the Third Temple, will it not be allowed to be vegetarian on Passover? Great question. That's a really good question, right? Most opinions are that when the third temple is built, right, Ezekiel's temple, when the Messiah comes and the third temple is rebuilt, that there will be a return to the animal sacrifices and the laws. The Jews will be obligated to eat of the Paschal lamb on the night of Passover. You don't have to eat a lot. It could really literally be a morsel, a tiny morsel. And you would have fulfilled your obligation. But there are other opinions that the laws of animal sacrifices were sort of at a time in history when, like, the standard way of worshiping in any religion was animal sacrifices, and it was sort of like to wean the Jews away from the old religions to their religion through the use of the familiar, the animal sacrifices. But it's, I think, Maimonides who says this. So even when the temple is restored, we'll worship there, but we won't restore the animal sacrifices. We don't know. We'll find out when Mashiach comes. And that's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow for Chagigah page 5 at the regular time, 6 p.m.